Hi, and welcome to the bonus webinar today. If you haven't seen our previous webinars in the Conceive Baby series, my name's Tasha Jennings, founder of Conceive Baby. I'm a naturopath, nutritionist, natural fertility specialist, and author. I write and provide expert comment for various media publications, such as the Herald Sun, The Age, New Idea, Mouth of Mums, the Bub Hub, as well as other parenting and pregnancy websites and magazines. My first book, The Vitamins Guide, is now in its third reprint, and that was published in 2013. It's available throughout Australia, Canada, the US, the UK, as well as, of course, the Conceive Baby website shop. And my second book, which you may recognise from the Conceive Baby website, is The Fertility Diet. The Fertility Diet was just published July last year. And the fertility diet really epitomises, I guess, where my personal passion lies. For the past 5, going on 6 years now, I've specialised in fertility and pregnancy. And my reason for specialising in this area was quite a personal one, really. I was wanting to fall pregnant and we were having difficulty. So what started out as a small personal project to help us conceive really turned into a career passion as I started meeting with researchers both in Australia and internationally. And I was really inspired by what I was discovering in relation to the impact of certain nutrients on fertility and their bioavailability, and the impact on the short-term and the long-term health of the developing baby. And this is how my company Zycia was born. Now, Zycia means life and is dedicated to promoting and supporting life in its earlier stages. And Zycia Natal Nutrients is the premium prenatal supplement that is designed to support that journey from preconception and conception right through to pregnancy and breastfeeding. And to further support couples on that journey to pregnancy, I relaunched the Conceive Baby website, which is what you have all joined us through today. Now, again, this was based on my own fertility journey, or perhaps lacks thereof, should I say. I was fortunate enough to have a background in health and nutrition, being a naturopath, and my husband being a cardiologist. I guess meant we had access to the knowledge and the medical contacts that meant that our fertility journey was relatively short compared to medical couples that I do speak with. And we're now blessed with 2 beautiful children, photos of whom you will see scattered across the Conceive Baby website, including the prominent photo of my gorgeous son Jonah that I do get asked about, the big baby photo. Now, my aim for Conceive Baby was really to bring together a team of specialists across all aspects of fertility and preconception health, so that other people who were struggling like we were could have access to the type of qualified expert information that we were fortunate enough to have. So I guess I've talked a lot about me right now, but the Conceive Baby website is really all about you, and supporting you in your fertility journey and supporting you to conceive and carry a healthy baby. So whether you're struggling with your fertility, whether you're going through IVF, or whether you're just wanting to plan ahead, good on you. So the important thing to remember, as I've said many times, if you have heard my webinars and had my emails, is that it's really important to remember you are already carrying all the genetic material that has the potential to become your future child. So the nourishing and the nurturing really starts now. The healthier you can create that egg, the healthier you create that DNA that you are passing on to your future child. Not only are the better your chances of falling pregnant, of course, but also the chance of a healthy pregnancy outcome, a healthy pregnancy, a healthy baby, and a healthy child in general, and for the rest of their life. Really, you are setting them up for life by creating that really healthy DNA that is really set at the moment of conception. During that preconception period, during those 90 days that that egg is developing from a follicle into a mature egg, you have actually the ability to influence your DNA, to even improve your DNA through your diet, your lifestyle, and also your key nutrients. which is the #1 topic that I do get asked about and why I decided to present on this today. It is a particular passion of mine. If you do have any questions as we go along, I know I have a few banked up here that I am going to tick off today, but if there are any more that come across today as we go through, feel free to type them in the chat box there. So I'm just going to get up my slides now for you here. Excuse the little delay here. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see this in a short moment. Now, this is, key nutrients. Diet versus supplements, really what you need to know. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is one I'm sure you all know about if you are in that preconception period, is folate. And now, folate is essential for DNA creation. Basically, you cannot sustain a pregnancy without folate. It is vital for that DNA creation, for that growth, for that development, which starts happening immediately. As soon as you conceive, that the growth and development commences. And that can be while you're riding the bike, that can be while you're sleeping. So really, we want plenty of folate available to help support that DNA creation right from day dot. It also supports the development of the neural tube, and we hear a lot about folate in relation to neural tube defects. But what is actually the neural tube? The neural tube is a tube that connects the brain to the spinal cord. So it really is our body's ability to communicate from that brain center, that hub of signals, to the rest of the body. So it, as it sounds, is vitally important. And neural tube defects can mean a loss of mobility in the legs, a loss of bladder function. If there is a sufficient defect, it will also lead to miscarriage. It won't be a viable pregnancy. The important thing about the neural tube is it actually does develop and close. So it is all capped off and sealed within the first 5 weeks of pregnancy. So again, this is why preconception folate is really important so we can actually start fueling that growth, which is happening so rapidly that this tube, which supports us and sets us up for the rest of our life, is actually done and dusted within the first 5 weeks, which is before we may even be completely aware that we are pregnant. So healthy folate levels also improve embryo quality and increase your chances of conceiving. Low folate levels are linked to subfertility and adverse pregnancy outcomes, including recurrent miscarriage, preeclampsia, and abrupto placentae, which are difficulties later in pregnancy. So folate helps you get pregnant, improve the quality of that embryo that's developing, and also helps to prevent complications later in the pregnancy as well, which are really important. So definitely dietary sources are paramount. You really want to be looking for plenty of dietary sources of natural folate when you are trying to conceive. And as you can probably see from this list here, there are more than this, but these are some of the top sources that you can look for. Your green leafies or your green veggies in general are great sources of folate. So your green leafy veggies, your Brussels sprouts, your asparagus, your broccoli there, your lettuce, spinach, all great sources of folate. So plenty of greens in there is really important. And yeah, big question I often get asked. So, okay, just showing that there's plenty of dietary sources. So if we can get plenty from our diet, why should we supplement? Now, the reason is, particularly with folate, is a very unstable nutrient, which means that a lot of it actually gets lost during any cooking or any processing. And I know if you cook your Brussels sprouts like my nan used to, so they're boiled to a mush, you probably lost most of your folate. And of course, the same goes for processing. Anything with a barcode almost that has been processed will have lost its folate, its natural folate. So I guess we're aware that folate is so important. So what companies are actually doing is fortifying our food with folic acid to, I guess, replace the folate that has been lost during that processing process. The difficult thing is that folate is the natural nutrient found in food, and folic acid is a synthetic supplemental source of folate. Now, I know we often use these terms interchangeably, but they are very different. There's a very important difference in that 50% of the population can struggle to adequately metabolize the folic acid, the synthetic source, into a natural folate that is able to be used by the body. So that's a very important distinction. So that's why the dietary sources are really important, and we must not rely just on our folic acid. So there, you can see the folate metabolism here. That folic acid starts up the top here, and there are quite a few steps in the body to actually get to that folate molecule, which is actually metabolized and absorbed into the system. And there's a common polymorphism, again, which affects around 50% of the population, and that's who struggle to metabolize folic acid into folate. That tetrahydrofolate step there, below that involves the MTHFR gene. And if you have issues with your MTHFR gene, you may struggle, and you probably will struggle, to metabolize folic acid into natural folate. Now, polymorphism of the MTHFR gene negatively impacts ovarian stimulation and pregnancy outcomes of IVF, as well as having implications in the risk of miscarriage and birth defects because of that absorption of folate. If we're not getting sufficient folate, we're not able to sustain a pregnancy. So it's important to look for some newer sources of folic acid. Folic acid's been around for a long time, and there's some great studies on the importance of folic acid for neural tube defects, but a lot of those studies were done over 20 years ago. There are some newer forms of folate on the market. Calcium folate and folinic acid are two of the best sources. They're actually a tetrahydrofolate, so they're further down that chain, so they can help to bypass that MTHFR step and maximize that folate uptake, which is obviously, as we've seen, really, really important during that preconception process for developing the eggs, and also for that neural tube and general development and health of the baby. So calcinate and folate and folinic acid can be better absorbed forms of folate for those with MTHFR difficulties. So what I suggest is to generally to my patients is to look for a supplement that provides both folic acid and a calcium folate folinic acid supplement as well, just so you're covering both of your bases there and really helping to maximize your folate uptake. But any sort of supplement, always hammer home this message, is never a replacement for a healthy diet. Always look at your dietary sources as well. The way I see a prenatal supplement is kind of like your insurance policy. It's providing a baseline of all your key essential nutrients to help fuel that growth, just to, I guess, cover off any variations in dietary fluctuations, which are natural. We don't always eat awesome 100% of heaps of folate and spinach every day, realistically, but our baby needs it. So a supplement helps to cover that off, but it does not replace it. So if you are on a great prenatal supplement, fantastic, but still make sure you look for those dietary sources as well. So the recommended prenatal intake of folate is 500 micrograms. You can take up to 1,000 micrograms. I know some specialists will hammer through a lot more folic acid and give up to 5,000 milligrams of folic acid. Generally, that has been an old school thought because you weren't metabolizing your folate, your levels weren't rising on 500, so they give you more and more and more and more. The thing is, if you're not metabolizing folic acid, giving you more is really not going to help because you're not metabolizing it. So it's best, again, look for that combination source to up your folate and your dietary sources as well. So between 500 and 1,000 micrograms of folate should be sufficient as a prenatal supplement alongside your diet. So that's folate. I guess that's the heavy hitter first off. Choline is probably a newer player on the market and one of my favourites. Most people have never heard of choline, but it's really important in getting a lot more exposure these days. Choline's actually been hailed as a new rock star prenatal nutrient. I saw an article in the US the other day. This is because it's a vital component of all cell membranes. It supports their integrity, their flexibility, and their function. And it's a major component of acetylcholine, which you may understand is responsible for, I guess, sending signals between our cells and allowing our cells to communicate and sending important messages between each other. So basically, choline keeps all our cells nice and healthy and it allows them to chat between themselves, send great messages between themselves. So choline, really important for general health, but of course, fueling growth and particularly brain development, really important. Choline plays a critical role in healthy brain development. Alongside that, we talked about the neural tube, which does connect the brain to the spinal cord. As choline is involved in sending messages, it's really also essential for that normal neural tube development and closure as well. So a higher dietary intake of choline is associated with a reduction in the risk of having a child with neural tube defects. And conversely, a low level of folate is associated with a higher risk of neural tube defects. So really important to start boosting your choline intake for that brain and neural tube development, which occurs, yes, straight away. And the studies are still coming out in relation to choline. There's a lot more research being done. And if you want to have a look on the Conceive Baby website, Marie Claudille, one of our experts, is phenomenal in her research. She's from Cornell University in New York. She's doing amazing things on choline research. So if you're a study junkie like me, feel free to look her up, and there's amazing stuff coming out on choline. But just a couple of things there have been shown to show improvements in Down syndrome dysfunction, reduce risks of schizophrenia, improve risk of Alzheimer's disease, as well as improved learning and memory as well. So really, as you can see, anything to do with that brain development, cognition, memory, learning is related to that choline. So you're really helping to build the best brain possible, for want of a better term, if you provide plenty of choline. These are just a few quotes that I picked out that I think really highlight the importance of choline. The importance of choline cannot be overstated as we continue to unravel the role it plays in human health and development. And that was the editor-in-chief of the FASEB journal in a study. And another one in the review in the Journal of Pediatrics stated that choline in the diet of the pregnant mother and infant is directly related to permanent changes in brain function. Without enough choline during the critical time of brain growth and development, intelligence, memory, and possibly mood regulation will be damaged permanently. So we may not be able to measure the exact impact on IQ or other brain functions, but we do know enough at this point to start preaching the choline message. And I think that's a great take-home message. We do know to start preaching that choline message, and it's really, really important, because up to 90% of women aren't reaching their adequate intake of choline. Now, really why that is because it's a relatively new player. The last, 10, 20 years, choline has been, I guess, on the radar nutritionally compared to our other nutrients, which has been studied for a long time. And the reason for that is that our body actually can produce a small amount of choline through our gastrointestinal tract, our gut bacteria. So folate, we are totally reliant on dietary sources. Our body cannot produce folate. We need to consume folate through our diet. Choline, our body produces small amounts. So it actually wasn't classified as an essential nutrient. And again, Professor Claudille, in an interview I did with her, said that it's kind of the unknown essential nutrient. That's because our body produces a small amount because it is so essential to health. Basically, we cannot survive without it. So we actually can't rely on the fact that we're going to consume it. Our body needs to produce a baseline just to keep us alive. But that amount to just keep us alive isn't what you want when you're trying to fall pregnant. You're not only just trying to keep yourself alive, you're actually trying to thrive. You actually want a healthy uterus, a healthy womb, a really healthy environment for a baby to thrive. You're creating that new DNA, and when that conception happens, and you do not know the moment that happens, you need that choline readily available for all that growth and development. So you really want an abundance of choline, not just the small amounts that your body is able to manufacture organically. So dietary intake is really important, and I've just thrown up some dietary sources there. The best sources of choline are lecithin and egg yolks. They're above and beyond all the other sources combined are your best sources. Again, when you fall pregnant, you always got to caution egg yolks being runny. They should be cooked, but pre-pregnancy that is okay. And lecithin is the granules that you find in your health food store. Excellent sources of choline. So again, dietary sources of choline, really important, as all the others. Definitely include all of these in your diet as well. But because choline is so important, and we do know that the higher your intake, the lower your risk, the better the brain development, the higher, the better the baby's brain can be created. I do recommend looking for a prenatal supplement that does provide choline alongside your other nutrients as well. But again, not a replacement for your dietary sources. Up your dietary sources, but to help bridge that gap, which a lot of people have in their diet, in choline, because we haven't really focused on it as such. It's good to look for a supplement that just acts as your insurance policy to make sure you're getting sufficient. Now, the recommended adequate intake for pre-pregnancy and pregnancy actually is 440 micrograms. So you want to do that from a combination of dietary and supplementary sources where possible. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is probably one you will have heard a lot about, and that's vitamin D. Vitamin D's had a lot of exposure lately. It's related to a lot of different conditions, and it's actually now known as what's called a pro-hormone, they're labelling it as. And the reason I guess they've put a different name, or some people have put a different name than a vitamin on it, is because of its widespread action in the body. It's linked to many health conditions, including infertility and subfertility as well. So recent studies show that women with healthy levels of vitamin D are twice as likely to fall pregnant. Women with sufficient vitamin D are also likely to have better quality embryos and a greater chance of an embryo implanting in the uterus, which both of those things are all things we really want when we're trying to fall pregnant, whether naturally or through IVF. Vitamin D is really important to help make sure those levels are up. So this is another quote that I pulled out. Again, I think these quotes really reflect the importance. This was a lead study author of a study that was just done the year before last, actually 2 years ago. Our work is the largest study to date to examine how vitamin D affects fertility in women who are undergoing IVF. We found that women who had sufficient levels of vitamin D were more likely to produce high-quality embryos and more likely to become pregnant than women who were deficient in vitamin D. So really important to make sure you check your vitamin D levels and have an adequate intake of vitamin D. Women who have higher levels of vitamin D also have a greatly reduced rate of complications during their pregnancy as well, including gestational diabetes, preterm birth, and infection. And again, that's really important to actually sustain the healthy pregnancy as well. I know when you are trying to fall pregnant, the main aim can be just to get pregnant, but it's not just about falling pregnant. It's also about creating a healthy baby and having a healthy pregnancy as well. So vitamin D can be really good support the whole way through. Now this one, unlike the other ones, I've really, hammered home the dietary sources and make sure you get plenty. Vitamin D, you really actually don't absorb a great deal of vitamin D through your diet. And again, when I said, look, I've thrown up the best dietary sources, but you will find more than that. Vitamin D, this is pretty much your limit of your dietary sources of vitamin D, and it's not particularly well metabolized by the diet, unless you are using it in the form of the herring liver oil or the cod liver oil or halibut oil there. They are good sources of vitamin D. I know over winter between the ages of 3 and 13, my mother gave me a tablespoon of cod liver oil every morning. Thanks, Mum. Didn't taste so good, but she was on the right track of vitamin D, great for the immune system, supporting you there. But there are, I guess, better ways that you can get that weight than by swallowing a tablespoon of cod liver oil. Your best natural source of vitamin D, I think, as we all know, is sunshine. So it's really important that you do get some sort of sun exposure during the day, most days if possible. If you live in Melbourne at the moment, I think sun's shining a little bit. We do go right up and down, and there are some days where we don't actually get much sunlight at all. And due to the risks involved with, I guess, excess sun exposure, Australian and New Zealand guidelines actually recommend supplementation over excess sun exposure to improve low levels of women in childbearing age. Because with sun, it's not like swallowing a pill. It's not even like getting it through dietary sources. There can be harm come to having excess sun exposure and serious harm from excess sun exposure. So we want to get enough, and enough really depends on the person. We actually can't quantify. Look, people will say 10 minutes. Some people say half an hour. There is no exact, this amount of sunlight will give you this amount of vitamin D. It depends on so many variables. It depends on your background, your culture, your metabolism through your skin, your ability to metabolize it through the skin. Studies have shown that there are some people in winter who metabolize no vitamin D through their skin, whereas others are great metabolizers and they readily get their vitamin D through their skin. It can depend whereabouts in the world you live. It can depend what time of day you go out, what makeup you're wearing, whether there's SPF in your sunscreen, how your clothes, whether the sun's actually getting through your clothes. There are so many variables in getting sufficient vitamin D that we can't quantify that yes, 10 minutes is enough or 10 minutes is too much. So again, during this really vital preconception period, I always suggest to, as an insurance policy, make sure you are taking a prenatal that does provide vitamin D alongside your other nutrients, just so that you know you're maintaining a good intake of vitamin D. And vitamin D is one I do recommend that everyone gets tested. A lot of your prenatal GPs or your fertility specialists will test for vitamin D. If they haven't, please ask. I recommend everyone get tested. The reason for that is because it's very difficult to raise low vitamin D levels. Folate, if your levels are low, you take a supplement, you go take good folinic acid, you boost yourself up, within a few days to a week, your levels are looking pretty good. It's pretty well metabolized. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble nutrient, and it can take a good 3 months to turn someone who has severely low levels into an adequate supply of vitamin D. And this is talking, there's studies now using 20,000 IU, huge amounts of vitamin D. It still takes a long time to boost those levels up. So if you haven't had yourself already assessed to see where you are right now, get your levels checked. See if they're okay, tick, great. If not, you can start working on it straight away. So really important to start boosting those vitamin levels as soon as possible. And generally, of course, look, summer's coming up. Definitely get some sunlight out there. The more sun exposure, the great. But also look at a vitamin D supplement as well. And the recommended prenatal intake of vitamin D is 600 IU. So between 600 and 1,000 IU, you'll find in most good prenatal supplements, which is generally sufficient for most people. If you do need more vitamin D, it is often better to take it in a staggered dose. It is better absorbed if you can take smaller amounts more often than a big hit all at once. So if you are low, I recommend take your prenatal supplement in the morning and your other supplements later in the day, depending on what your practitioner recommends. So if you are taking above 1,000 IU, I'd always recommend to get it done through a specialist or get your healthcare professional to assess that for you. So another one you'll probably recognise, and I do get a lot of questions on, is iron. Now, iron is part of the DNA trifecta. In a way, it works in combination with folate and vitamin B12 in the synthesis of our DNA, which of course is vital for that growth and development which is occurring during pregnancy. So those three nutrients really important in combination to support that growth that is happening immediately. So dietary sources, again, unlike vitamin D, dietary sources are really important for iron. And again, I've put these into two categories here, and probably you can see by what's in the categories as to what they are. Heme iron is a meat source of iron, and non-heme iron are your vegetarian sources of iron. Now, the differences between heme and non-heme iron, and why people say like a meat diet is better than a vegetarian diet, is because heme iron is stronger. It is a stronger source of iron. It is uptaken regardless of what your levels are. It will get into your bloodstream straight away. I guess the benefit in some ways of your non-heme iron, so your vegetarian sources of iron, are that they are more regulatory. if your body is low in iron, it will grab as much iron out of those vegetarian sources as it possibly can. If your body has pretty good levels, it will probably grab a bit, an easy amount of iron. So it will regulate to a certain extent. So that's why if you are vegetarian and you are trying to fall pregnant, yes, you can get enough iron from a vegetarian diet. If you want to jump back on the website later on, I have written a blog on that particular topic. You just need to know what you're doing. And have a really healthy vegetarian diet, including like your lentils, your soybeans, your kidney beans, your tofu, etc. So you can get enough iron, just need to make sure the differences, and that's why vegetarian iron is different to what's found in meat. Now, a lot of people are on iron supplements, and there are three main types of iron supplements. There are slightly more than this, but there are three main types that you'll see on the market. The ferrous sulfate, a ferrous fumarate, and an iron amino acid chelate. Now, a lot of people, I guess the main issue that I hear about iron supplements, as you can probably already guess, is I get constipated when I take iron. My stool turns black. I feel nauseous. I feel sick. It ruins my guts when I take iron. If you are getting those side effects, I highly suggest you have a look at the back of your packet and look at what form your nutrient is in. And I would probably take a guess that it's in a ferrous sulfate form. Now, ferrous sulfate is a very raw, cheap form of a heavy metal. I think that's what we've got to keep in mind, is that iron is not a vitamin. It's not something that's easily got out of our system and into our system. It is a heavy metal. And if you take a heavy metal in a raw form like a ferrous sulfate, yes, it is highly, highly likely to cause constipation, gastric upset, nausea, black stools. And the issue, not only with those side effects, I mean, that's, terrible that you get those side effects, but also your supplement's not being properly metabolized. If you are finding that the supplement is causing constipation, it's turning your stool black, then where is your supplement? It's not in your bloodstream. If it's causing constipation, it's turning your stool black, it's not being properly metabolized. So not only are you getting all those horrible side effects, but you're not actually getting your iron properly either. So I always avoid a ferrous sulfate where possible. They're freely available in most chemists, but they're your cheapest, rawest form. Ferrous fumarate is a step up from that. It's a more natural form of iron, but your best form to look for, particularly if you do struggle with those side effects, is an iron amino acid chelate. Now, what this means is it's bound to proteins that make it more absorbed. It's already chelated. Which means it's much more readily absorbed. It's more like the iron that's found in food, and you rarely get the same side effects with an iron amino acid chelate, and you'll get a great uptake of the iron amino acid chelate compared to your other forms as well. So more readily absorbed and less side effects, which is what we all want out of a supplement. It's all well and good having all of the vitamins and minerals actually in the supplement, but if they're not reaching your bloodstream, they're not being effective. And that's what my first book, The Vitamins Guide, was really, I wrote for that reason. When you're looking at a supplement, don't look at who's endorsing it, what's written on the front of the label. Look at what's written on the back. It's all well and good having A to Z in there. What forms are they in? There's a lot of different forms, as we can just see with iron. There's a lot of different forms and your folate of the different nutrients, some which are really well absorbed, some which are not so much. So look at what forms they're in, look at what doses they're in, and make sure it's right for you and that it is actually reaching your bloodstream where it's going to be effective. So again, I touched on this before, but I think it's really important to remember, because often people think, okay, iron, I'm feeling tired, I need some iron, it must be iron. I think we're pushed as women where you must be low in iron, everyone needs iron. Iron is a heavy metal, and it's actually not easily excreted from the body. Actually, it's not excreted from the body at all in some people. You actually need to metabolize it and use it. So you don't want to be taking too much. And unlike some minerals like calcium or magnesium, we need large volumes of those nutrients. We need a heap of, we need thousands of milligrams of calcium every day. Iron, we don't. We only need trace amounts of iron every day, and the upper safe limit, as recommended by Australian and New Zealand guidelines, is 45 milligrams per day. So you really don't want to be consuming more than that 45 milligrams per day unless clinical deficiency has been diagnosed and under the advice of your healthcare professional. And again, I always caution taking higher doses than that in one big hit, because iron isn't that easily metabolized. A chelate makes it much more easily metabolized, but taking a big hit of iron, a big dose of iron in one hit, you're generally not going to get a great uptake. You are much better to space a small dose over the day than you are to take a big hit of iron all at once. So generally a small dose, and you probably find most prenatals somewhere between 5 and 12 milligrams. There are some that I know are above the upper safe limit, so do have a look at the packets and look what you're taking. If you are getting side effects, that may be a big reason for it. So yeah, I guess the take-home message for iron is we don't always need it. Get your levels tested is a great way to do it, and take a chelate in a lower dose and a more divided dose if you do need to boost your intake. And even the liquid forms can be a great way if you are low in iron to help boosting that. And again, dietary sources. Don't just go for a supplement because you're low in iron. Take your prenatal, but then look at what iron is in. Start looking. We've got some great recipes on the Conceive Baby website if you look in the recipe section, but jump on there and you'll find some great recipes that you can include to help increase your iron as well. And again, because iron is not excreted from the system and we only need it in small amounts, the amount we need prenatally compared to the amount we need in pregnancy actually differs, because we don't want to be taking the pregnancy allocation prenatally because it may be too much. The recommended intake prior to pregnancy, so when you are in that conception phase, is 18 milligrams. During pregnancy, it does boost up to 27 milligrams because you are fueling that growth and that DNA development during pregnancy. But prior to pregnancy, 18 milligrams is your recommended daily intake of iron, because again, we don't want to be taking too much of a heavy metal where unnecessary. Now, I touched on this one a moment ago. It does form the third in the trifecta. It is often the forgotten nutrient, is vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is required alongside folate in the production of DNA and is therefore vital during that rapid development that occurs during pregnancy. So vitamin B12 deficiency is also associated with infertility and subfertility. So really getting a healthy B12 level prior to conceiving is really important for both that preconception period and during those first stages of pregnancy when that DNA development is really rapid. Vitamin B12 alongside folate helps to reduce homocysteine levels, high levels of which can negatively affect fertility and conception. And low maternal levels, once you do fall pregnant, of vitamin D are associated with an increased incidence of miscarriage, preeclampsia, and abrupt placenta. Again, it's not just about falling pregnant. We want to make sure that's a really viable, healthy baby and a healthy pregnancy as well. So B12 does help to support all that DNA creation, all that growth. And the thing to remember about B12 as well, or to note about B12, is that taking high dose folate can actually sort of push out your vitamin B12 levels. If you are taking high dose folate, folate is actually vitamin B9. Should actually take vitamin B9 and vitamin B12 in a relatively or not similar dose. So if you are taking a high amount of folate, you should be taking at least sort of 50 to 100 milligrams. Even there's our supplements up to 500 milligrams of B12 in there as well. I think what confuses people, I'll put choline up there, I'll just change that on my next slide, but the recommended prenatal intake of vitamin B12 is 2.4 micrograms. And I guess that's because it's the recommended intake. It's not the optimal intake. The good thing about vitamin B12 and the big difference from a nutrient such as iron that you really need to caution, you don't want to take too much of. That's why any iron supplements, by the way, I should have mentioned, come with a tamper-proof lid. If a child does swallow a bottle of that ferrous sulfate iron with 50 tablets in there, they can die from that, because it is toxic. Our body has no means by which to excrete it. We just have to wait until our body needs it and utilises it. And if we take it in doses that are that high, it can be fatal. So yeah, iron is really got to be cautioned how much you take and make sure you're taking the right dose. Vitamin B12, please ignore that choline there. Vitamin B12 recommended prenatal intake is 2.4 milligrams, but you can't take too much relatively. The only thing it will do is push out your levels of some of your other B vitamins, but up to 1,000 micrograms of vitamin B12 is fine. Generally between 100 or 200 or even 50 and 100 is probably sufficient for most people. Now, they'll just touch on a couple of other important nutrients that I'm not going to cover in detail, but other important nutrients I've just highlighted here are iodine. Now, iodine is really critical for brain development. Iodine deficiency is actually the #1 cause of preventable brain damage and defects during childhood. So we really want to make sure we've got adequate iodine. I don't actually focus on iodine mainly because it is so important that World Health Organization standards now regulate that all prenatal supplements do provide iron. So if you are taking your prenatal supplement, you will have your recommended dose of iodine in there. If you do have a thyroid condition, it's always important to consult your physician or your doctor about your medications, because people on thyroid medication shouldn't be taking iodine. And it's not actually that they shouldn't be taking it. It's more that it alters their thyroid function levels. So what they need to do if they are going to be taking iodine, they need to have their medication possibly adjusted or at least their levels monitored for that. So, but it is critical for brain development. So really important that we have iodine. Omega-3 I often get asked about because people say, well, you say choline is really important for brain development, but I thought fish oil and omega-3 was really important for brain development. Absolutely, they both are. Now, choline helps with those signals that we were talking about. The acetylcholine helps the cells chat with each other, helps those signals get around the body nice and fast with our learning, our memory, helps cells talk to each other. Omega-3 keeps the cells nice and supple and healthy, those cell walls really healthy and flexible and more like, you know, nice juicy grapes than sultanas. So keeps our cells nice and healthy. Also great for your skin, hair and nails. So omega-3 is really good. I generally don't suggest take it within a prenatal supplement. The main reason for that is you shouldn't really mix oils and nutrients just stability-wise. It's going to be better to take it in a separate supplement if you do want to supplement with omega-3, and look for a high-quality source of omega-3 too. So yeah, unfortunately, the more you pay generally reflects what you're going to get with your omega-3. Some of your cheaper fish oils will actually have that horrible fishy taste that goes with them. Fish oil shouldn't taste fishy, really. If they do, they're probably a little bit rancid, not stored properly. So yeah, a good quality of omega-3, definitely great. But often if you do see it in a prenatal supplement, generally it's in a really low dose as well. It's just in there to sort of, I guess, pat it out and look really good. It's not generally in a therapeutic dose or what I would recommend as a dose. Omega-3 you can't overdose on. It is an essential fatty acid. If you take heaps and heaps of it, I guess, you may actually store some of it as fat, but most of us actually need a lot of omega-3. So we will actually utilize it for our cell membranes and our hair, skin, nails and keeping our cells nice and healthy. So a good dose of omega-3 definitely is a great support, but I generally suggest to take it outside your prenatal supplement. As with antioxidants, antioxidants come in a lot of sources, and that's why I grouped them into a big bundle here today, and it's probably a topic on its own. But antioxidants come in your superfoods, largely your blueberries, your raspberries, those sort of foods. And also you can find coenzyme Q10, resveratrol. What antioxidants do is help to mop up free radicals in the body. And again, without going into a whole nother topic on its own, free radicals are basically like these unpaired electrons that grab onto other cells and they change them. They hang on to them. You know, you've got a nice healthy cell there and you've got this other one floating around that it's missing something. And their free radicals are caused by smoking, drinking, gas fumes, car pollutants, basically living badly or being exposed to pollution, etc., will create free radicals in the body. And these free radicals are little cells that are they just want to grab onto healthy cells and they want to change them. So they grab onto this other cell, they hang on to it, and they change its function slightly. And sometimes those function changes are harmless, quite innocuous. They generally cause aging. So we do want to slow that down regardless, but they can actually be even more harmful than that and be cancer causing. So antioxidants are really great in keeping our cells healthy, which is a number one thing we want to do when we are wanting to fall pregnant. We're wanting to have a healthy baby. We want to have all our cells nice and healthy. So some good antioxidants in there. I love dietary antioxidants. So just, get heaps through your diet. Anything with lots of color in it generally has lots of antioxidants. So that's where, as I was saying, blueberries, raspberries, tomatoes, lots of summer fruits coming up. So, oh, I flicked over the most important picture at the end there. I just like to touch on the reason why I do this, and the reason why the Conceive Baby website was developed is because of this, really. As you can probably see here, this is my family. Struggling to conceive was a real insight to me. And I have a lot of empathy for people who are struggling, because I know what it feels like not to know whether you are going to get to this picture or not. And this is the picture I had in my head. This is a picture I just assumed would naturally happen. I think, from the time we hit puberty, we're bombarded with messages on how easy it is to fall pregnant and how careful you must be. But the reality can be quite different, and I know it was for me. So I completely understand where everyone is coming from, and I'm really passionate about helping other people achieve this same dream. So I'll just pop my slides off there and get back to you all. Okay, well, thanks for attending here today. Really appreciate your time, and I hope you've got something really valuable out of that. If you do go away and you do have any questions, I am contactable through the Conceive Baby website. And as I've said in our previous webinars, I'm really excited by the lineup of specialists that I have to interview for next year, which will be kicking off on the 7th of February. So I'll be releasing those dates shortly, so keep an eye on your inbox. In the meantime, if there are any questions that you do have, or any topics that you would like our specialists to cover, do let me know. And anything else you have feedback in relation to the Conceive Baby website, I look forward to hearing from you.